I think we are live right now on Facebook. My name is Carlos Miguel Prieto. I'm music director of the Louisiana Philharmonic. And this is our weekly happy hour. I've stopped counting. I don't know how many we've had, but what I know is that every single one of them has been absolutely memorable. We've had members of the orchestra. We've had full string sections, full string quartets. We've had some founding members of the orchestra. We've had members of the musical community in New Orleans. And now I have the privilege of being joined by truly one of the most learned people I have ever met. I don't know if you think of yourself like that, Alfred, but Alfred Lemmon for me is really one of the most smart, coherent, and also cultivated, we would say, culto in Spanish, people that I know. There's hardly a topic that I have ever started where Alfred doesn't know tons and doesn't know way much more than the time allotted for our meetings. Welcome, Alfred, and thanks for accepting our invitation.
All I will say, Carlos, is after that wonderful introduction that I did not bribe you to do, is everyone is entitled to their own false opinion.
Well, please, for the three people who may not know what you do and what's your area of expertise, could you please tell them?
Well, my early training was as a musician, but as life went on, I evolved. And I eventually got a master's degree in music history, and then I got a doctorate in Latin American studies. And fortunately or unfortunately, all of the sources basically for Latin American studies are basically the same as the bulk of the sources for New Orleans. And so I landed up as an hourly worker at a reception desk at the Historic New Orleans Collection in 1981. And for one reason or another, I stayed. And I'm currently the director of the Williams Research Center of the collection, which has given me a wonderful opportunity to explore my diverse interest. And the one with the LPO gives me a particular sense of gratification to make known the incredibly rich musical heritage of New Orleans.
And I would like to invite people who join in to ask questions or send whatever comments through the chat box that you have on this Facebook Live, because there are many interesting topics that we could talk about. And one of them, I think, is the yearly historic New Orleans Collection concert, which ironically was our last concert of the season, which had to be just aired. It was aired live, but without an audience. So we were, I believe, maybe technically the first orchestra to ever do that, because we did that on the night that everything kind of came down when the NBA decided to shut its season. That's that same night when we had our HNOC concert at the Cathedral, which is a, I guess, happy and sad event. But I don't want to make this about I want to talk about our association and the many incredible experiences you've given me, and I mean me as a conductor, to learn new works. Because Alfred, for those of you who may not know, in the yearly concert that we put thanks to Historic New Orleans Collection, Alfred always comes up with a narrative for the concert, which is centered on the history of New Orleans. And before I came to New Orleans, that is many years ago, I guess, 15 years ago, I did not know many of the things that I now know thanks to Alfred. And there's so many things I had never known, that the first place in the American continent where the Beethoven violin romance were played was in New Orleans, or a certain opera, or a certain symphony. And through your research, through your knowledge, you've given the LPO and myself not only an incredible chance to reach a very beautiful audience, but also something which I cherish very much, which is a historical perspective of music in New Orleans. And that is something that very few people in my career have, and you have it in incredible amounts, which is this combination of historical knowledge and musical knowledge, and the two put together with so much love, that the hardest thing in this concert is to actually make it short enough for the transmission and for the audience. As you know, we always have a much bigger list than we can actually perform. But Alfred, can you tell me, because something which I know, but maybe people don't know, is that you actually did some of your training in Mexico City. Is that not right?
Yes, and I actually, at one time in my youth, when I was still showing great promise, I actually taught Mexican music history at the Instituto Nacional de Bellas Artes. And the person that learned me there was someone that you know. He's unfortunately not with us anymore, but a composer, Manuel Enriquez.
Of course.
And it was just a wonderful time. It was a period when, for a youngster like me, I was still relatively young then, the musical environment of Mexico was so incredibly wealthy. Every night you had a chance to hear any number of things. In fact, I remember on several occasions I went to the Sala Chopin. I heard the Prieto string quartet. And probably in my files, because I would clip out the daily notices of concerts and put it like in a massive scrapbook sort of thing, in file folders day by day. So probably in there's some references to the Prieto string quartet.
Well, that's so nice of you to say that. And that's one of our most cherished memories, is that we came, the Prieto string quartet, which is my father, his brother, who's my uncle, my cousin, and myself, and played in one of your most beautiful rooms at the historical New Orleans collection. And I remember that was a really beautiful evening.
Yeah, I remember that evening well. And then y'all came back a second time, I think, with the Romeros and did something.
Correct. Yes. And if you invite us again, whenever time allows, we'll come back a third time.
Well, you can never tell what we have up our sleeve.
So,
in fact, Mimi Kruger and I have had some wonderful conversations lately.
Well, let me tell you that as we see the future that is so uncertain, we have actually talked a lot about HNOC and that beautiful room as one of the possible places where we could play something. And nothing could make me happier than even just thinking about that possibility.
Well, we actually have a more beautiful room now.
Really? Where is that?
That's in the new building that we just restored as a exhibition center at 520 Royal Street that many people remember as the old WDSU studios. And so you'll have to come by and check it out.
So tell me, how many buildings does HNOC now occupy?
We have the original complex that is at 533 Royal Street, that is about 7 or 8 buildings joined together. Then there is the second complex, which is the Charter Street complex, that is where the research center and administrative offices. And then we have another building that we affectionately call the Ice House, which is where we have our educational classrooms and publication offices. And of course, the crowning jewel is 520 Royal Street, which is the front part of the complex is a wonderful early 19th century building that originally belonged to the Signoret family. And have you ever been to Bordeaux?
Bordeaux, France? No.
Oh, my heavens, you must go there. And you know the Grand Theater and the Grand Theatre in Bordeaux that's really quite famous. The Signoret family, they were wine merchants, wine exporters, importers, had many vineyards, and they were quite well off financially. And in Bordeaux, the family had their own theater. And that theater today, the family's private theater today, is actually the rehearsal hall for the great theater in Bordeaux. And so that exhibition center is devoted to the history of the French Quarter, and we do include information on music, but also we have a new construction building that we were allowed to build that permits us to host large-scale traveling exhibits.
And can I ask you, is HNOC, will you be allowed to open anytime soon?
Well, at present, we have our courtyards open. 3 of the historic courtyards are open, and one of which has a connection to Mexico. The one at 533 Royal Street, one of our buildings was actually the headquarters of a Mexican firm by the name of Lazardi Frères that was a major international banking company that did a lot of work with, say, the Rothschild family and the Barron family. And so that courtyard is open to the public. The courtyard at 520 Royal Street is open to the public, and another courtyard on Toulouse Street, 1718 Toulouse Street, which is immediately, it backs into our Royal Street property, is open. So we're able to interpret a lot of New Orleans history through those courtyards. And then the research center is open, but we're limited to appointment only, a maximum of 4 people.
So if anybody wanted to go visit, they would have to make a reservation. Is that the way it works now?
Yes, to go to the research center, you would have to make a reservation. for the courtyards, they're open, and we just we practice very good social distancing within the courtyards.
And can I ask you another question? Are you originally from New Orleans?
No, I am from Lafayette. I'm a native of Southwest Louisiana, but for family reasons, I was always in between New Orleans and Lafayette. So I sort of enjoyed the best of both worlds.
So is your family of French origin in any way?
Oh, heavens, no. I'm a Heinz 57 variety.
Because you are very famous for organizing these trips, and I've heard that you've organized trips to different parts of France, to different parts of Spain, and your trips are very, very famous. Is that not so?
I'll prefer to be modest for once.
I can imagine anyone who goes on those trips ends up learning more than perhaps a school year of information, thanks to what you visit and how you prepare it. And do you ever include in those trips concerts or operas?
Oh, heavens, yes. We always do something musically. On the last trip that we had, which was to Vienna and Budapest. In Budapest, a friend of mine there worked on the design of the new concert hall in Budapest. And he designed the organ there. And so we had a special show and tell of that wonderful instrument. The Budapest Opera was in the midst of renovation, but we could visit the foyer. So we had a little mini performance. And then in Vienna, we actually had a good visit to the opera in Vienna. And everywhere we go, we always try to include something musically, in addition to more, how can I say, erudite things.
Yes, and I wanted to touch upon something which over the last couple of years we have included in our HNOC concerts, and not only the last couple of years, but over the last really decade. Thanks to you, I've gotten to know about people like Louis Prima, people like Jelly Roll Morton, people like that, but also people who are actually now working in New Orleans in all kinds of different types of music. One thing which we are looking as a model to the future of the LPO is including in our concerts local artists who may not be necessarily associated with what we call classical music, but with music that is very much of the city of New Orleans, sometimes historically connected to New Orleans, or just some musicians who take advantage of this incredible ambiance that there is in New Orleans for music. What do you think about this model of including in our classical concerts repertoire that may be of a different type, and including artists who are more associated with popular music? That's something that I believe very strongly in, because, as you know me, I don't place barriers between kinds of music, only quality of music. And as Duke Ellington used to say, there's not popular or classical music. There's just good music and all the rest. So do you share my belief that music of all kinds can be a part of a program?
Exactly. One of the things that's very interesting about this series is over the past 14 years, we presented works by 75 composers. 25 of those composers were Americans. 15 of those composers were either born or had a very close relation to New Orleans. And 10 of those composers were African Americans. And, I think one of the things that's wonderful is by utilizing local talent. I'll never forget the year that we had Jermaine Basil sing. And I happened to find out that she was going to be celebrating her 85th birthday a few days later. And you had the orchestra play and everyone sing happy birthday to her. One of the things that people do not realize about Jermaine is that she's a classically trained double bass player. She would take the bus across New Orleans to Xavier Prep to school. Then she went to Xavier University, where she continued her studies. And Xavier has had, in the 1950s and 60s, they had an opera program that was unrivaled. For example, they did a lot of New Orleans premieres, say like Poulenc and stuff like that. And then when she graduated as a classical double bass player, the nuns found her a job either in Houma or Thibodeau. And then one night, one of the nuns said, Jermaine, there's a jazz combo that doesn't have a double bass for tonight. Why don't you go play double bass with them? So she did. So she began playing with this group on Saturday nights. And then eventually something happened and the singer was sick. So they said, Jermaine, we need a singer. And so that's when Jermaine began singing. But to show you how the level of training, I first met Jermaine Basil because she sang in a choir that specialized in Gregorian chant, Renaissance music, and Baroque music. And that was my first encounter with Jermaine. And to me, it's just a wonderful way to show this blending of musical styles and musical heritage. And the same thing with Fats Domino's grandson that we had a year or two ago. He sang Walking to New Orleans with the LPO one night, but a few nights earlier, he had sung in a work by Bach. And so to me, it's all enriching. And I just always feel that the early jazz musicians, people do not know how well trained they were in classical music. In the Library of Congress recordings of Jelly Roll Morton, he talks about one night going to the French Opera House, which was nothing unusual for him. But his family had always considered being a pianist a woman's profession. But that night he went and it was a man that played the piano at the French Opera. And that was the night he decided to become a pianist. So to me, all of this heritage just plays off of each other. Every segment enriches the next.
That's very, very powerfully phrased, and I agree completely. Plus, you gave two examples of that are exactly to the point. And I think we're going to pick your brain in the future because over the years you've given us so many good ideas for the HNOC concerts. But if you don't mind, I'm gonna pick your brain for our series, because one of the things is that we're gonna have to be very creative and also very flexible. Everything, you know, we always plan so far in ahead, and suddenly we have to plan everything based on the circumstances of a certain week or of a certain month. But as you know, the Louisiana Philharmonic is comprised of 67 musicians who have their heart and soul in New Orleans, and who are dying to come back to the city and to give back to the city. Your ideas will be part of the mix. Once you told me something which stuck to my mind, and I want you to tell me this again, because one of the, you know, sacred figures of Mexican history is Benito Juarez. And as we were practicing quartet before one of the concerts, you told me, if I'm not mistaken, first you told me where Benito Juarez lived when he went from Mexico to New Orleans. Then I think you told me he worked in a cigar factory.
Yes, he did. He rolled cigars on in the 100 block of Royal Street. And what's very interesting, the Mexican Consul General is trying to do something to commemorate his stay right now in New Orleans. And just last week, I got an email from her. And so we have one of our staff members at the collection trying to dig up as much information about him as possible. And what this emphasizes, what the case of Benito Juarez emphasizes, is that constant interrelation of Mexico and New Orleans. And it didn't begin in the 19th century. It didn't begin in the 20th. It didn't begin when we were Spanish. It began when Louisiana was French. We were so isolated from the rest of the French world that Bienville, the governor of Louisiana, would be sending people to the Viceroy of Mexico to thank the Viceroy of Mexico for supplying the colony of Louisiana with everything ranging from boats to ammunitions to food. You know, believe it or not, while there were some animals that came from Saint Domingue in the Caribbean, the first real big immigration of livestock and domestic animals in the early 18th century came from Havana. So it just goes to show you that New Orleans belongs to that wonderful Gulf of Mexico region. And I'm sure you've been to the Mocambo Hotel in Veracruz at some point in your life. Well, believe it or not, in 1740, to show you how close the relation is, Veracruz, you know, it's very easy to get to New Orleans by boat from Veracruz. But in those days, it was very difficult to get from Veracruz to Mexico City. So they decided to open in New Orleans a Spanish school for young boys from Veracruz. Now, how's that for a bit of obscurity? But it underscores that relation between New Orleans and Mexico.
Interesting, because that relation sometimes goes on in institutions like Tulane University, which has one of the most well-known experts on Mayan culture,
right?
And many other things, and important Mexican writers who have gone to New Orleans to seek inspiration, but somehow that's I don't know why it's not so well known in Mexico. I mean, it feels like to me like we are taught that Benito Juarez was this great free thinker and illuminated president, and we never we never, history is taught, especially official history, sometimes is taught in a very interesting way. And it seems that Benito Juarez was never chased out of Mexico, which he was, and then he went to New Orleans. I learned that from you. And imagine that. I did all my schooling in Mexico, not my university, but I had no idea. And there is a statue of Benito Juarez, not so far from where you probably are now. And there's a statue of different Latin American liberators.
Exactly. And it's interesting is in the Spanish period, we always hear Bernardo de Galvez. Now, something that you might not know about Galvez is you probably know his impact on construction in Mexico City. He finished the cathedral in Mexico City. He finished Chapultepec Castle. But one of the things he did that is really critical to the shared cultural history of New Orleans and Mexico is he wrote a series of guidelines for theaters while he was viceroy in Mexico City. And it was very progressive for the time. He was one of the first people to encourage nighttime performances as opposed to late afternoon performances. He did radical things such as outlaw smoking in theaters. He was a tremendous patron of ballet. And it's very interesting, but we never think of Bernardo de Galvez as a person with musical interest. But in reality, he brought the first professionally trained composer to Louisiana, specifically to compose music in the Spanish style for the present day St. Louis Cathedral. Again, that tremendous impact of Spain upon New Orleans.
Is it something that you think, because I hear you speaking so much about Spanish people, and I from the first time I visited New Orleans, I was surprised of hearing that the French Quarter was called French, because to me, it looked like a Spanish quarter.
Exactly. And one of the curious things about New Orleans is that our name is French. But you have to realize that, and this I do want to discredit the French contributions in the least. But one of the things you have to realize is that the city of New Orleans, when it was turned over to Spain, was just sort of a rough layout done by the French military engineers. Most of the construction was undertaken by the Spaniards. The city council of today was established by Alejandro O'Reilly, the second Spanish governor. And one of the exciting things is there's so much heritage here. You can go to the New Orleans Public Library and on the third floor, look at the minute book for the very first meeting of the City Council of New Orleans, which most people don't realize. Every time there was a disaster in New Orleans, whether it be hurricane or fire, we seem to have one with some regularity, a disaster here, the Spaniards strengthened the building codes. So as a result, today there's about 35 buildings in the French Quarter that date from the Spanish period.
Is well, I mean, even the fact that the Cabildo is called Cabildo, that's not French at all, right?
Exactly.
And can you tell us a bit about, do you have, since you have so much information, do you teach at one of the universities? Are you ever invited to teach a course or a seminar in the history of New Orleans?
Oh, heavens, no. I'd be a terrible teacher.
I would sign up for that class.
One time I taught a course at Loyola, and I got reported to the dean. It was a course called Golden Age of Spain, and I was a last moment substitute. I was brought in at the last moment, and so I asked the students to write down a sheet of paper why they were taking the course. And they said because they wrote down invariably because it was going to be an easy A. So, and they were all in business administration. So I decided, okay, I'll make sure that they know 100 facts about Spanish history would be useful to a businessman going to Spain. Except the only stipulation I made was, and the answers were always fill in the blanks. The only thing was, if it was Felipe, it had to be spelt in Spanish, or Carlos, whatever the term was, it had to be spelt in Spanish. And it had to be spelt correctly in Spanish. Well, the students were infuriated with that, and I was reported to the dean on multiple occasions. I don't think I'd be a good teacher. I was too strict. And they had to even include the accents.
Well, I would actually sign up for your course. I mean, because it's always so interesting. Here, I'm reading some messages by my friend Monica Miller, who says hi, and she says the most northernest part of the Caribbean is New Orleans. Do you agree with that?
Exactly. You know.
And then she says, lots to say. I'm a tour guide and I'm feigning to give a tour. Well, let me ask you some more thing, because do you live in the French Quarter?
Oh, no. I live uptown where there's a little bit of green space.
Okay. And have you been able to walk around a bit?
Oh, yes.
And because I'm not in New Orleans, so I'm just asking you for curiosity, because I picture you as a very moving around kind of guy.
This
which
unfortunate incarceration has been awful. I mean, this has been the worst punishment possible. You know, I mean, it has been a disaster for me. Having to stay in the house, my heavens, Carlos, you have no idea. Even my dogs are angry at me.
Well, my dogs are not angry at me because I don't have dogs, but my kids are wanting their father to be going around and like leaving home because I'm giving them such a hard time. But in the next month or so, I was planning to go to New Orleans, and one of the things that I always like to do is bike around, and so I was interested if it's possible to bike around, and it's probably very hot, but I don't mind that.
Yes, it's a little bit on the hot side.
And but you do take walks?
Oh yes, it's actually a rather tranquil time in New Orleans, and it sort of brings me back to that last concert that we were talking about. You know, the next day the town was so quiet, and I do think that we made history that night because that program, we're so fortunate that it was streamed and televised, or not televised, but carried over the radio, that our audience didn't really shrink in size. Because the cathedral only can handle about 1,000 people. We cheat a little bit always and squeeze people in there, but basically the bulk of the audience is the audience that participates via the audio streaming and the streaming that's done. And we've developed over the year, our current estimate is that audience numbers approximately 30,000 people, which is really amazing. And so I really think, we have to thank the Nancy Link Foundation, who made the streaming possible for that very historic evening. Today, I get 3 and 4 notices a day about a concert being streamed from this place or that place. But I really think we were part of the first. And again, I think it's part of our heritage. You may or may not know it, but in 1952, the Orleans Philharmonic Symphony began broadcasting a series of 12 concerts to school children throughout the states, throughout Louisiana, excuse me. But it was the first such program of a symphony orchestra undertaking something like that in the United States. And one of the things is, I don't think New Orleanians realize the magnitude of contributions that New Orleans has made. We're very much like the Caribbean. You think of the Caribbean, its musical impact on the world. And New Orleans is sort of that way. Our impact on the world has been far greater musically than people imagine. And that's why so many people say we are the northern outpost of the Caribbean. And it's the truth.
There are more comments of people that you're going to be happy to hear from. Patty Adams says 2 New Orleans treasures are in the house tonight. Well, thank you. Thank you for that, Patty. That's very nice of you. Frankie Giovinazzo, Carlos is a rock star.
A rock star. I saw that one.
Oh my goodness. I think that that's like something that I should show my children, because they don't consider me a rock star, but that's just the way it happens.
The cookie crumbles.
The cookie crumbles. You know Patty, don't you?
Oh, yes.
Patty and Jim were the first.
In fact, I saw Jim yesterday driving down the street while I was talking to Mimi on the phone.
Oh, really? Oh,
yes.
It makes me so happy that actually just to hear that 2 people that I adore crossed each other outside, because that's to me what's so great about New Orleans is friendships and how people spend time with friendships. And I really look forward to seeing you in person and going to have dinner or lunch or whatever, or coffee with you in person, and exchange ideas about things that we could do together. Because
listen, the musical heritage of New Orleans is so incredible that the possibilities are unlimited. I know you know this, but Debussy's composition teacher was a native New Orleanian, Ernest Giraud. So, you can have a program with, you know, Debussy string quartet, for example. And another student of Guiraud was Loeffler, who was so important for the musical scene in Boston and New York. People just do not realize the enormous musical heritage of New Orleans across the board.
I agree. I agree completely. And it's something that I've always battled against with people who don't know enough about New Orleans, or some New Orleanians who actually think that classical music, or what we do, music, is not what New Orleans is famous for, but another kind of music. And I think
Listen, Carlos, one of the programs I'm dying to do is, you know, several of the early jazz musicians commented upon the music they heard at the French Opera House. You could do a whole program of music that these early jazz musicians had heard at the French Opera House. You go back to, say, Jelly Roll Martin, and he names his favorite movement, say, of a Verdi opera. You know, who on earth would imagine that today? But it just shows you how this music is not divided. It's a shared history that enriches each other.
Yeah, that's amen to that. And there's so much to do that again, I go back to the original thing I said, which is that you are going to be a very important partner for us, because of
I better behave.
Well, you do behave.
Everyone's entitled to their own false opinion.
So what are the possibilities that HNOCB may be opening a little bit more to the audience? Is that something that you are waiting for guidance from the city?
Well, museums are allowed to open in phase one of the reopening process. You know, and we're just playing it very cautiously. We want to be responsible citizens and not do anything foolish. So, you know, that's basically it. We're doing a tremendous amount of work. My colleague Amanda McFillin has developed all sorts of wonderful programs online for people to participate in. For example, like a musical trivia game or night at the movies. In fact, very shortly, we'll be re-showing one of the LPO concerts, the one that was devoted to free people of color. So I've just been working that out with Diana and Mimi. And of course, probably in a couple of weeks, the March 11th concert will be being shown on WLAE. We just want to encourage people to play it safe so that we can come back stronger.
Of course, there's no doubt about it. But I think that you, like me, are dying for the opportunity to have people come to your museum or to come hear music, because I think that I think that you know that the arts will have already have, but the arts in presence will have a very important healing effect on the audience. I don't know if you know, but yesterday in Madrid, Teatro Real inaugurated a big series, a very important run of a socially distanced Traviata. You should look into it.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and apparently it was a big musical success. It was done very carefully, and there will be a way to reach people.
Oh, I'm certain of that. And one of the things that we have to realize is, while I'm very grateful for these technological miracles that we can enjoy, I still haven't figured out how a radio works, for example. There will be a point where people want to experience the arts live. And so often we have to think, you know, in London, after World War II was over and the city was bombed, everything was devastated, money was tight, they chose to do one of the most lavish productions of Sleeping Beauty ever done. And when they asked, why are you spending so much money when there's buildings that have to be rebuilt and this is need, we're short of food? And the answer was rather simple. People need beauty right now to give them the spirit to continue. And I think that's part of our joint mission. You know, it's a special mission of the arts community.
Agreed completely. And if there's ever a city that values art, that values performance, and that values beauty, it's New Orleans, because everywhere you go, you see some kind of manifestation of one of these. Since we're running into the hour of program, would you like, is there anything that we haven't touched upon that you would like to share with our audience?
I would just like, you know, to thank the community for their support. Of course, in my case, I'm a little bit prejudiced or preferential of the historic New Orleans collection, but also all of the arts collections, especially the LPO, because, you know, the collection, because of our founder, has a special relation to the LPO. And I would like to just take this moment to thank our supporters, not only of the collection, the LPO, but the entire arts community, and to send a very strong message to them that the best is yet to come.
That you put it so beautifully that I get goosebumps, because I do.
The children just turned the air conditioning down.
No. It's really beautiful how you phrase it, and I want to continue that same idea. Also thank everyone who has and who is and who will be supporting the Louisiana Philharmonic. As you know, the Louisiana Philharmonic is not only a fabulous orchestra, but it is 67 musicians, 67 families that had an incredible trickle down effect upon schools, upon the teaching of music. So it'll be very important. It's going to be very important to support the Louisiana Philharmonic and support the historic New Orleans collection, because they are essential parts of the city. And right now, well, we can't be with you, and who knows how we will be with you in September. We will be with you somehow, but your support is valued and needed. So I would like to thank you very, very much for this hour, because I've enjoyed it very much. I always enjoy your beautiful conversation, your incredible ability to be so convincing with your words, and with the way you put together phrases is something that I've always, it's musical. You know,
it's the influence of having learned Spanish in Mexico.
Well, there you go. But you make my English sound so terrible. But next interview will be in Spanish, and then I'll get my revenge.
You never can tell. I know some words in Spanish that I'm not supposed to know. You know,
Well,
so funny. It's so funny. The first time I gave a talk in Madrid, it was so hilarious. At the end, I apologized in Spanish for my North American accent. And this person came up to me, this friend of mine came up to me and he said, Alfredito, no hablas un español norteamericano. Hablas un español tan raro que debe ser llamada la española a la limonada. So, in other words, what the person said, oh, my dear Alfred, you don't speak Spanish like a North American. Your Spanish is so rare. It should be called the Lemmon version of Spanish. So, I can tell you some stories that we couldn't probably repeat over the airways of my pronunciations that had drastically other meanings.
Well, Jim Atwood just sent a message. Hi, Jim.
Oh, my heavens.
He says, love seeing you two tonight. And also Alfred is a jewel. And I agree.
My heavens.
I'm
going to have people with false opinions.
Well, Alfred, we have to finish here because time is time and it's finite.
Yes, but exactly.
I want to thank you, and I also want to invite you to that in the very near future, we have a lot more interaction because at the LPO, we're going to be picking your very smart brain.
My poor little brain. My poor little brain.
So thank
you so much for having me. Bye-bye.
Thank you, and see you in New Orleans.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.